And we are live.
Episode 13, the Sports Parent Playbook. This is an episode that I'm very excited about because, for one, I actually took a lot of notes and I did a little bit of a brain dump when I did this, simply because it's a loaded topic. You know, being a sports parent, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm obviously a parent. All three of my kids play sports. They've done sports from, let's see, jiu-jitsu, hockey, rock climbing, baseball, football, Pop Warner, all of the above. There's a lot that goes into it, and not just from my point of view. I know a lot of the conversations that I have with parents when they come in, a lot of what we're talking about is like the politics of sports. This is what's going on with my kid's team. And there's a lot of, some of it's complaining, some of it's, I don't know what to do. And I want to start off by saying I'm not the perfect sports parent. I know I'm not. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm learning. I say it's a playbook, the Sports Parent Playbook, but the reality is when you think of a playbook is situational, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a playbook, a football playbook, the play is based off of what maybe, based off of the situation.
Saying, yeah,
exactly. So no rhyme or reason behind the sports playbook, the Sports Parent Playbook. But I will be the first to tell you that I've made mistakes, and it's a learning experience for me. I know it's a learning experience for you. And the reality is there is no perfect play because there is no perfect scenario. And there's so many variables that go into being a sports parent. But the idea of this came to me about a month ago. I was actually at my son's hockey tournament. It was a 3-day tournament. And we're in our hotel, and in the lobby, you see so many kids. Obviously, they were playing hockey in the lobby, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But my son goes, "Oh, that team right there, that's from Hawaii, right?" And, we get to talking to a lot of these kids, and they're super good kids. And I ask them, "Where are you from?" And, some were from Hawaii, some were from like Arizona, some were from like Florida. It's like... Yeah. They're from all over the country, and all these kids, the ages varied from 8 years old to probably about 16 is my guess.
Yeah. Just crazy they're that young, traveling that far nowadays.
Yeah.
But aside from that.
So my wife, she asked me a question. She goes, who do you think is like, do you think these parents are like, in their mind, they believe their son's going to go like to the NHL? And she asked me that straightforward because she was just like, I can't believe people are traveling, getting an airplane and getting a hotel, and they're doing all these tournaments. And this tournament was in Irvine, which for us was like an hour. And, we did have to get a hotel.
Yeah.
But she was asking like, what's the point? Like, why are these like, what is the point? They're not going to, she goes, do you think anybody here is going to go to the NHL? I looked around. I said, honestly, probably not. I would say out of every single kid in that tournament, which is hundreds and hundreds of kids and tons of teams, you'll be lucky if you have maybe one that actually goes to NHL. So she goes, well, what's the point then? And I said, well, we're here too, right? I'm not doing this because I'm doing this because my kid's going to go to the NHL and be a professional hockey player. I said, I'm doing this because because of the process. I'm teaching, I want my kid at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when my kids are adults, I want them to be good humans. And I don't just want them to be good humans. I want them to be excellent humans, meaning they've developed work ethics.
Yeah.
They've developed learning how to work as a team. They've learned how to deal with adversity. They've, learned how to win. They've learned how to lose. I said, I would hope that the reason all these hockey kids are here is because the parents feel a similar way. right? Everybody is different. Every parent can parent the way they want to parent, but the common denominator, I would hope for all parents, is that we have our kids' best interests in mind.
Want to develop them, get them to being great humans on the outside world, whether it's within sports or within a job that they decide to go into later on. I completely agree. So what does that mindset kind of look like for parents going in? How do they deal with the struggles within sports and keep that mindset? 'Cause life gets tough. So from your personal experience so far, doing travel hockey now, having 3 kids playing sports, what have you noticed in your time to kind of be beneficial to get yourself back on track as a parent to make sure your kids still going the right way? To not get into that bad mindset, I guess you can kind of call it, or the unhealthy mindset.
Well, the first thing we have to define is what is the role of a sports parent, right? Because as a sports parent, there's many hats that we have to wear. Sometimes we are the motivator. Sometimes we are their coach.
Yeah.
I know I've coached multiple seasons from, of my kids' sports. I've also been their trainer, right? For obvious reasons. I've also been just the cheerleader on the sidelines, cheering them on. So I think as a sports parent, we have understanding that our role is going to be multifaceted. There's no one hat that we're wearing. We're having to wear multiple hats. And I think one of the first things we have to recognize, and this is something that I'm very conscious of, and I'm not perfect. I think I've said that like a million times already, right? And I'm going to keep repeating that because I'm still learning, is recognizing in this situation, which hat am I wearing? I'll give you an example. I remember many times I get very excited. I love being a cheerleader. So
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I enjoy coaching my kids' team, but there's times where, you know what? I don't want to coach. I want to just be a cheerleader. I want to be on the sidelines cheering them on, and I can get a little bit excited.
Yeah.
And, my wife, she's always tone it down. Let's bring it down a little. Let's bring it down a couple notches. And, I know I'm guilty of that. I'm very competitive. I'm a sports fan.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my wife, I said, look, you see how I get with sports when I watch a football game, a basketball game, a UFC fight. I'm very animated. I get very excited, right? I said, just let me be excited. I will tone it down a little bit, but I'm being excited. I'm not upset. I'm not angry. I'm not like they have to win. That's just the sports fan in me. And if you could imagine, if I'm animated with a basketball game, an NBA game, a Super Bowl, how animated am I going to be when it's actually my kid out there playing? Right.
Kids know the difference too, right? They're on the court. I knew the kids who had parents who were still energetic, like you on the side, but they weren't mad or angry at them. They still told them, hey, you played well. This is what you did well. They communicated with them after the game. And then there's the parents who are like loud but angry. Those kids knew versus the other kids. They also knew which one was which. So kids are smart.
Yeah, I think it has to be, like I said, the first thing, is recognize which hat am I wearing? Am I mom or dad? Maybe they just lost a game and now it's like I put the dad hat on and it's just like, hey, it's all good. So I think as far as like we're talking about a playbook for parents.
Yeah.
I think the first one is understanding what our role is, right? And also understanding like, why are we even doing this to begin with, right? So always have the end in mind. So when I say the end, I mean, let's say 18, they leave the house, go to college, do whatever they got to do. They're no longer under your roof. What is my end game here? And do I want them by the time they're, 16, 17, 18? Do I want people to be like, man, your son is a really good football player. He's a really good, like, do I want my son to be known as that? Or like, man, your son has incredible work ethic. He's a phenomenal human. And that is the end game for me. So the results of the sports career, right? When they're 18, if they go to college, don't go to college, to go pro, don't go pro. As a parent, that has to be relevant. I want to have a good human being. And when we make all of our decision making revolves around that concept of build the human first, then the football player, build the human first, then the jiu-jitsu practitioner, build the human first, then the hockey player, build a human first, then the rock climber. Those have to be in the forefront of our mind. And I know for me as a parent, I'm very competitive, right? I've been like, I don't like to lose an Uno. It's like, I'm very competitive, right? I'm very animated. I know that about me, but there's this part of me that I have to constantly remind myself that, hey, look, it's okay.
Yeah.
Last Saturday, I was coaching a flag football game, and it was an incredible game. We lost, right? And to be honest, over the course of the season, we've lost most of our games. I think we've only won one game. And when we do the huddle at the end of the game, you do your team speech.
Yeah.
And, I got the kids in a huddle. The first question I always ask them is, how much fun did you guys have? And they're like, they lose their minds. They're like, oh my God, so much fun. That was awesome. And I'm just like, how much fun? And, you could just feel their vocal
Energy,
cords like vibrating, right? They're just so excited about what they just experienced. And I remember the week prior, coming from a losing season, one of the parents mid-game grabbed her son and left, right? And this is not a serious league. It's a flag football league. And the parent picked up their kid, left. The kid's like, what's going on, Dad? The mom and dad, game's still going on. I want to play. Took his kid. And I don't understand exactly what happened and what led to that situation where you're so upset at the 8U game that you're like, we're out of here, right? And then I'm asking the kids at the end of the game, how much fun did you guys have? And everyone had a blast. They had so much fun. And not only that, like seeing the progression from week 1, this is probably like week 6 now or something like that.
Yeah.
Seeing their progression has been awesome, and everyone's giving good attitude. Everyone's giving good effort. Those are the things that are within our control. That put a smile on my face. But then at the same time, my curiosity is like, we checked in with the parent and said, hey, is everything okay? And everything's fine. Responded, everything's fine. But I don't know what could have led to a parent saying, you know what, during the game, taking their son and saying, we're out of here. But it wasn't a good look, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a very good look. And unless I could be wrong, there was some emergency that happened. My guess is not. But that just, once again,
the energy they had that day too.
Correct. But that, once again, that just reminds me of, like, did this parent have the end in mind? Right. As parents, this is the next thing, the next tip of, as far as the playbook, is control what you can control, right? Things don't always go our way, in the sense of maybe your child doesn't get the position he wants to get. Maybe another child gets a little bit more playing time. Maybe your child's on offense instead of defense. And, we can't control coaches' decisions. And I try to be very unbiased. I'm coaching, right? So one of the things that I ask my wife often, I ask her, I said, hey, babe, if you didn't know me and you saw me coaching, would you know who my son was? And she goes, no. I said, okay, perfect. Because I want to be as unbiased as possible, and I want to help put the kids in the best situation to succeed. So if I put a child at one position and I move another one to another position, it's because I feel in that moment that's going to give them the best chance to succeed individually. And then if they're succeeding individually, as a team, we're going to succeed as a team.
Yeah, I think it's actually really important that you do that, because it's a huge learning curve for a kid to have to understand you don't just get gifted things in life. you have to earn them. And I remember too, playing sports. I had my middle school team and my high school team. Both the Suns coaches played around the time I was playing there. And the middle school team, I got knocked down from the starting five because he wanted his son to start, who was a grade below us, which didn't go well. And the high school team, that was the same issue, to the point to where even the other high school rival teams understood that he was the coach's son, and they would banter him for it. So it can create an unhealthy atmosphere, one, for the kid, especially if he hasn't earned the spot. But two, it's a valuable learning lesson for the kid too, because if he feels like everything's being given to him, well, what's he going to expect in life too? Everything to be given to him. So yeah, that's a huge learning point. That's actually a really good thing that you do then for your kids, because you got to learn somehow, right?
You got to learn. And, like I talked about, like control, what you can control.
Yeah.
What we can control are our attitudes, right? So I remember something that I'm still working on is, let's say, because you got to understand my lens is a little different because I do this for a living. I'm coaching, I'm training, I'm in sports. So the coach in me wants to go, hey, in the second quarter, there was a situation, you could have lined up this way, and I want to give that feedback. And then I got to remind myself, like, whoa, I'm not a coach anymore. Dad hat. Support him, give him a hug, tell him good job.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that situation? Did you have a good time? And, I can control my emotional state. So as a parent, I think it's very important that we learn how to control our emotional state, because your kids are watching, my kids are watching, and they're seeing how I act. They're seeing how I react. And I've had times where I don't act the best way, and now I'm aware of it. I'm learning. My kids are 10, 8, and 5. I have another decade worth of athletics, more than likely,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to make those mistakes, and it's even recognizing those mistakes. So now, something that I do often is I always praise the small things, right? So for example, I don't like to celebrate outcomes, right? I don't want them to feel that my emotional state is based off of them winning or losing. I want them to know that my emotional state is based off of what they can control, which is their attitude, and it's their effort.
Question then, going into LTAD, long-term athletic development, for a kid, at what age do you think you have to get a bit more stern within their playing style to get them to become better athletes? Because you're talking about like these football games, 8, 9-year-old parents getting upset. We can probably agree the refs aren't calling as much things as they could be because they want the kids to develop and learn and have fun, which is a perspective thing parents have to kind of realize. So for long-term athletic development, what does that kind of look like on the parent side? How much is it support? And then eventually does it ever change into maybe we push them a little bit more in a certain direction?
Obviously, that depends on your child, so there's no like clear-cut answer, but there has to be a fine line between support and pressure. You don't want to be, for example, you put so much pressure on your child, like to win, that they all of a sudden they're like, sports is about winning, and that's it, right? Because then they will do the opposite. They will lose love of the sport. They will see it as mom and dad will only validate me a certain way if I win, right? Yeah. So pressure is good, right? Because it creates adaptation mentally and physically. But putting pressure into, for example, if my son, I do this with one of my boys. Actually, I do it with both of them, but one of them, he goes, I'll tell him something, and I'm like, do you want to know? I ask him a question. Open communication. Do you want to know why that kid beat you? He goes, yeah. I said, this and this and this. I said, maybe you should work on this thing a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then that outcome might not happen as often. So then I might put a little bit of pressure in the sense of, let's say a couple weeks later is like, hey, how many jump shots have you made? How many throws have you made? How many catches? How many shots have you taken? So so pressure is good, right? Because at the end of the day, they're still a child. Yeah. So they do need a little bit of pressure, but I'm very careful on how I direct my pressure. So I'm not going to direct pressure directly towards the outcome, because outcomes we can only influence, we cannot control. Then there's support, right? So then there's pressure, and then there's support. You know, if a child just lost a game, they're a human, their emotional state might not be the best, right? Yeah. Another story, sideline story. Last week, I had one of my boys on my team, not my son, but one of the kids on my team. Great athlete. He's a stud, big motor. He can just keep going. And he drops a wide open pass. He got open downfield, but it was still pretty hard. He was running full speed. It wasn't an easy catch. So yes, he was open. He ended up getting open, breaking the receiver, dropped it, and then he throws his arms down, and he was like, he was a little hard on himself. Yeah. So he comes to the sidelines, and I told him, I won't say his name, obviously. I told him, I said, hey man, I was like, I just talked to your dad, and he told me you're going to be grounded for the next 4 weeks because you dropped that pass. And he goes, no. He started cracking up. And I was like, yeah. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. If my son drops the next ball, he's grounded for 6 months. And he started cracking up. And then immediately it just clicked. Yeah. He goes, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I said, hey, you got open. You did this right. You ran the right route. Sometimes you catch some, sometimes you drop some. It happens. You know, you know what I told him? I said, you know how we improve our catching? He goes, oh, I just practice more. I said, that's it. I said, that's it. It's not a big deal. And then immediately he was like, oh, it's like a sign of relief. So I made light humor out of the situation, and to let him know that it's not a big deal, because kids are outcome driven, right? Yeah. We all, if you play a sport and you're not playing to win, then what are we doing? Right. So we're not showing up to just, hey, I'm just going to participate. Like, we still want to win. Like, as a team, that's the goal, but I can't control that outcome. I can only influence it. Were we practicing the right way? Are we running the right plays? So that would be a situation where it's not about pressure. I'm not going to say, hey, you need to practice on catching more. That wouldn't have been appropriate, right? Instead, I supported him, you know, made a little light humor out of the situation. And I said, it's okay. You did everything right. It's just the other guy, he recovered, and you took your eye off the ball. It's not a big deal. We practice.
Especially at that age too. It's especially not a big deal at a collegiate level, right? Now we're talking about like the difference between you starting and not starting, but correct. At that age, especially, just let him play, let him learn.
Yeah, that leads me to the next point. It's celebrate the small victories, right? Celebrate the things that are within the control of the athlete. If your athlete's 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, he can't control winning and losing, right?
Do not pin one player for the whole team's loss. Right?
Except Mahomes. It was his fault. I'm totally kidding. Super Bowl Sunday just happened. No, celebrate the small victories. So celebrate, like, hey, great job. You know, when they're in their driveway working on their jump shot, hey, great job. That's awesome that you're doing that. You know, celebrate all the controllables. So I try to avoid as much as possible celebrating the outcome, because that's not within our control. So celebrating small victories, like, you know, hey, I love your effort. Celebrate their effort. Celebrate, you know, if I told my son, hey, I want you to catch this ball 50 times. I remember he was watching on Netflix, the wide receiver. I think it's just called Wide Receiver. Is that what it's called? It's an episode where they follow a few NFL.
Yeah, and then like they have the quarterback series too. Yeah.
Yes, they have. We're watching the wide receiver, and my son was watching Amon St. Brown, and he would do up close catches, like, and he would say he'd knock out like 100, and I think he said he was doing like 102 a day because he found out one of his friends was doing 100 catches a day. So he goes, I'm doing 102 a day. And he was like 10 years old at the time, right?
Yeah.
So then Jackson goes, my son goes, okay, I want to do like 50 a day, 100 a day. So I celebrate that.
Yeah.
You know, and another thing, as a sports parent, we don't all of us have careers, right? And all of us are human, which means we have an energy meter. And there's times where we don't feel really good. We had a long day at work, right? And we just want to come home, eat dinner, sit down, and just catch our breath.
Yeah.
And then my son comes out and goes, hey, Dad, can we catch a ball? That's a moment right there where you have to balance out as a parent. You have to take care of yourself, but you have to create that balance. So I rarely tell my kids no. So I would say maybe 75% of the time I will say, yeah, let's go do it. Let's go shoot that puck. Let's go play basketball. Let's go throw that football.
Yeah.
75% of the time. But then there's the other 25 where I tell my kids like, hey, Dad's a little tired right now. He worked, but I promise you we'll do it tomorrow. Right. So I think as a parent, it's very important. The majority of the time you're supporting your kids, right? But you also have to have that balance and take care of yourself.
Self-sacrifice, but you can only self-sacrifice if you're also
Correct.
filling up your cup.
But
too.
if my son knows and my daughter and my kids know that most of the time I say yes, it's a rare thing for me to say no. So I'm like, hey, Dad's really tired right now.
So they know, they understand.
And they know.
Okay.
I'll say, hey, or I'll give them a limit. So that's another thing that helps me when I do drills with my kids. I'll say, okay, you got 20 minutes and I'll block off 20 minutes, nothing to me, right? Even though I know they can go for like hours.
Yeah.
I'll say, hey, Dad, and they're just so excited. I did this with my son the other day. We were playing hockey outside and I had to go to work and I was working on my laptop and I really didn't have a lot of time. I was like, 15 minutes. I was like, you got 15 minutes. He goes, okay. Played hockey, went to work, came back that night. We got in bed and I was like, did you have fun like playing with Dad? He goes, oh my God, that was so much fun. I was like, hey, can you teach Dad some more moves? And he was so pumped. So that 15 minutes meant a lot because he wanted to show me his moves. And that just almost like invigorates his fire for the sport.
Yeah. Right.
And where I wanted to say no, I really did because I was really tired and I was in some projects, but you know what? There's times where I do have to say no, but most of the time I say yes. And then I'll even add a time limit to like, okay, we got 30 minutes, we can go do this.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I find that competitive spirit and that love for the sport, they're going to get that when you do it with them. I know everyone's situation is a little different, but if any opportunity that you have where you can throw a ball with your kid, you can do these things. Awesome. Because now what I like to do is as we're playing outside with my kid, I'll use that as a coaching moment where I can bring up, hey, do you remember when you got beat on this coverage? Do you want me to show you a little secret? That's like my, kids love the word secret, right? When we show a little secret on how to like make sure we can stop that next time, he goes, yeah. But now we're playing back and forth.
Yeah.
And that it became an opportunity for me to say, look, here's a coaching moment. And I put my coach hat on for like 10% of the time. And then I'm back to Dad where we're just playing.
Diving deeper into that, then that's also communication too, right? The skill of communication. Because I know a lot of parents who might see something like for you, for example, or even me seeing some kids do it and they go, how do I look? And it's like the sloppiest form ever. It's like, how do I communicate? So like, for example, right now, can you give us an example? Let's say a kid runs a route, does a terrible job at it, but we still have to be supportive and say it in a way to where we can also coach him.
Correct.
What does that kind of look like?
I think one of the important things, communication, that's another, part of the playbook, right?
Yeah.
Is just act like a lot of times I'll ask my kids when we're doing things, and my kids do a lot of different things. They don't just do one sport. I'll let them choose. I'll ask them, I'll say, hey, would you like to, you want to practice running routes, or do you want to throw the ball and I'll run the route for you? Obviously I'm crossing my fingers hoping that I don't have to run, They have chose that a few times.
Yeah.
But just asking them, because now you see where their mental state's at. And then when my kids go, I remember one of my kids the other day, he goes, what did he say? He said something pretty extreme, but it's not what he meant. He said, like something like, I don't want to ever play the sport again. Or it was something that came off very extreme. It was one of those things that had like a double meaning. And I asked him what he really meant. And he goes, I'm tired. And I told him, I said, hey man, if you're ever tired, totally cool. We can just go hang out, do something else. I was like, do you not want to play this? I was like, oh no, I love it. And he almost took like an extreme like approach. And then he backtracked and go, oh no, I was just tired. I was like, oh, that's totally cool. If you're ever tired, we could totally do it at a different time. And that's where, just communicating and letting them know, like, it's okay to not practice too. There's times where we also want to practice. So like I said, there's no perfect like way to approach it, but communication will definitely tell you how they're feeling, or it could be something as simple as, hey, next spring, do you want to play that sport again? Or would you like to switch it up? Or do this. So instead of just leaving it open-ended, it's like, would you like to do baseball or basketball? Yeah. So it's providing choice. And then once they make that decision and they choose it, now we're going to work hard. We're not just going to be lazy. So there's a fine line. I rarely let my kids just like be lazy. Yeah. Right. But I do give them the freedom of choice, because throughout that we've discovered, like one of my kids, he's really good at hockey. Never played hockey in his life until maybe a year and a half ago. He played all kinds of sports. He's done baseball, done jiu-jitsu, done all these other sports. And he wasn't bad, but he wasn't great either. He was just like average, right? And all of a sudden grabs a hockey stick and boom, just knows what to do with it. And I'm just like, and some parents ask me like, did you play hockey? I'm like, dude, I've never played hockey. I literally learned how to skate. I think I talked about this maybe a couple months ago. I literally just learned how to skate on rollerblades, like because of my kids. I like to do it with my kids. Yeah. And now I'm like, man, I got to learn how to rollerblade. Hopefully I don't fall. Like I'm not trying to fall.
He's got all the pads on.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it was just like through exploration. Then I found out my other kid, he clicked, my oldest, he clicked with rock climbing. Like the way his brain works, like it was like the Neo from the Matrix. He was like, he'd look at the route and be like,
see all the numbers.
Yeah. And he'd be like, I know exactly how to climb this rock. And it just clicked. I had no idea. Then we took him outdoors. He did an outdoor, he climbed like 100+ foot wall. Pretty scary, terrifying for me as a parent. Oh, terrifying. I know when my kids are doing jujitsu, but having this open communication and letting them know that, hey, we're not going to be lazy, but I will let you choose, right? We're going to be active. It's awesome. And as a byproduct, my kids love activity and they don't like being inside. So they rarely play video games. We don't allow them to, have electronics Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, when they are allowed to have those electronics, guess what they want to do? They want to go to the park, play with their friends. They want to go outside,
do other things.
And then they run out of time. They're like, oh, I didn't even get to play. So communication is a big part. Just figure out where their emotional state's at. If they're a kid, that maybe a little lazier, we all know which kids are a little more driven, which kids are a little more lazy, then do it with them. You got to figure out like what gets them going. Right. Yeah. And just talking to them is probably the easiest way to kind of figure out what that is.
Yeah. I've actually noticed that too within like some practices or sessions. Some kids, energy wise, they don't even look like they sometimes want to be there. So communicating as a parent to even see like, because I feel like that's where the hard line can kind of be, is where is it that I need to pressure them and push them? And where is it that, okay, maybe it actually is like a mental stunt they're going through where they actually need the break. They need to walk away for a second. Let's go try out a different sport and then come back. I feel like that's the hard part for a lot of parents. Yeah. Is kind of looking at it from my scope is if I had a kid right now, I wouldn't know where that line is of, okay, is he just being lazy or is it an actual and that's where communication and understanding that
correct
can come in then, right?
And then another thing, another cheat code or play is balance out your commitments, right? I know kids that are really, really good and they do so much with their sports, but now they're suffering in school, right? Or maybe they're not doing their chores at home, right? Or maybe they're so busy with I've talked about this many times with tournaments, and maybe that weekend you need to skip that tournament and take your kids out to, take them out to the zoo, like go have some fun with them. So I think it's very important too that as a sports parent, we balance out our commitments. We don't want our kids to correlate sports with, that's the reason I couldn't go to juniors, my best friend's birthday party because I had a tournament. Right.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. If you're in that space, there's gonna be times where it's like, yeah, I just recently had, it was actually my dad. We had to reschedule like a birthday because it fell on a tournament date. Right.
Yeah.
And this tournament, so it does happen, but I don't ever want to make that the norm where I'm like, we have to miss everything because we can't miss this thing.
Some parents like that. And we talked about in previous episodes about kids who struggled with that mentally.
Correct.
Yeah.
So balancing out your commitment, and you have to weigh out the cost, right? So maybe you do have to skip that tournament. Maybe you don't, so making sure that we maintain the human side of things and understand that the end game is I want my kids to be good humans, right? So is this decision that I'm making right now conducive to long-term health, mental health, physical health, right?
Everything has intention.
Right? There's times where it's like, no, we're not skipping this practice. We got to work hard. We're going to learn work ethic, but there has to be that balance. Obviously, as you asked me about like what age, obviously as they get older and their psychology is a little more developed, then we can kind of push that gas a little bit more. But allowing kids to go to birthday parties, allowing them to not do that tournament. But once again, I'm going back to the communication. If you know there's a tournament and you're a parent, don't at the last minute cancel on your coach. Right? Because then that puts off a bad message. Every decision that we make as parents, our kids are paying attention. So I remember one of my kids just started travel hockey, and we talked about commitment, and that was the first thing we were talking about with the coaches. So communication isn't just with the kids, it's with the coaches, and saying, hey, what type of commitment does this entail? How often is practice? How often are tournaments? What if there's an event, a birthday, something we can't make that tournament? And they were like, so awesome. They were like, look, family first. And, obviously we want the kids there, but if there's one time, but now if you're having to skip on the regular, this is probably not a good fit. So obviously when we make a commitment, there should be a bias towards that commitment, but there should also be a little bit of flexibility. So as a sports parent, you want to communicate these things in advance with the coaches and say, okay, what's the tournament schedule look like? What's the practice schedule look like? Where is the practice? Because now you got to factor in what? Driving distance. Like, oh man, practice is at this time. It takes me 30 minutes to get there. Then my kid has to come home and do homework, and now his grades are suffering. So we have to almost like take a bird's eye view and look at like the domino effect of every decision we make.
Yeah. I find that perfect.
Yeah. And it doesn't take a long time. Like you can literally take 2 minutes and be like, look at your calendar, and see what's going on. And then you prioritize, what needs to be prioritized.
You can actually just kind of look at it like training, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. When we train, we're not just looking at making them a better athlete, but more specifically, we're looking at, okay, what qualities do they have that are great, and what qualities can we work on that are currently maybe less developed, that are currently causing their game to not be as great as it could be. Same thing within life with the kid. Is his school suffering? Is his sports suffering? Is his family time suffering? It's finding those areas, what's currently great, what's less, and how can we find the way to balance it out? Actually, am I correct on that? Where it's just the same thing?
Yeah,
just
I was talking about the story in the very beginning, how Lacey was like, what's the point of these parents doing all of that? And one of my favorite things about sports is kids are capable of being excellent at multiple things at the same time. Is a child capable of having a 4.0 and being a really good athlete? The answer is yes. I remember, and this stigma used to be, it's probably still around, not as much, but I remember when I was a kid, there was this stigma like, if you're super athletic, you're probably not a very good student. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And if you're super, super smart,
Big God.
you're probably not very athletic. And I disagree with that. I remember years ago in 2018, I was training a kid at Temecula Valley High School, and he graduated. I didn't even know this was possible. So he was an All-American linebacker. He ended up getting a scholarship to Stanford. His GPA was like 4.8. I didn't even know he can go that high. I was like, what in the world?
Classes.
What in the world? Like, how do you get a GPA that high and be a stud of a football player?
Well, being smart is also relative too, because it's not just being book smart, but there's street smarts. And then on top of that, there's what they teach in school. And then there's what you actually might do outside of life that school doesn't provide. And so like for them, they're smart because they can see things other people can't see on the field.
But what intrigued me about him is he had excellence in multiple categories. I know his dad's a surgeon, and obviously that helps, but he did something right as far as raising his kids, because all his brothers, he was the youngest out of like 5. They were all exactly the same way. They all got, played D1. They were very intelligent, worked very hard, but that just shows that, like, if you have the right process and the right balance, like, you can have excellence in multiple categories. I had a kid, because I get this all the time. Parents will use me as, kids tell me things that maybe they don't tell their parents, and kids feel comfortable like, hey, Coach Henry, I want to tell you about this.
Yeah.
Right. So parents will often be like, hey, can you talk to so-and-so about his math? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Because I'm very black and white.
Yeah.
And I remember telling this kid, I was like, man, I saw what you've done with this baseball. I saw what you've done with your swing, with your speed, your strength. I saw the extra hours. I asked him, I said, what's the worst part of your game in baseball? Which skill set is the worst you struggle with the most? Like, it's, if you have all your strengths and weaknesses, what's at the bottom? And I think he said it was his hitting, right? And his hitting is good, by the way. But he goes, yeah, it's probably my hitting. That's probably like my weakest part. I said, okay, cool. I said, how's your hitting today compared to a year ago? He goes, oh, it's way better. My average. And he was all excited about his progress, right? I said, how did you get your hitting to improve? You see where I'm going with this, right? Yeah. And then it just clicked for him, because we were talking about math.
Yeah.
I was like, what's your best subject in school? He goes, language arts. I said, we already know which one's your worst one. Math. I said, so do you put the same energy into, like, just like hitting, you put a little extra into that. So now we have to go do some tutoring. We have to spend a little extra time. Some things are going to come to you very natural, and that's cool. That's awesome when that happens, because it feels effortless, right? Other things are going to be a little bit harder. For me, I remember, man, I got a lot of stories. When I was in 7th grade, so from kindergarten all the way through like middle school, I wasn't the brightest kid on the block, right? I used to, when they would send out the progress report, and it would say like in danger of failing. I used to get that all the time. I would try to check the mail so my parents didn't catch it. And yeah, they found it. So I remember one time, 7th grade year, my dad goes, hey man, what's going on? Like, it says you're in danger of failing like 3 classes. Like, I was like, ooh, he found it. And I told him, I said, well, I don't feel like doing my homework. No, I didn't say that. I said, I don't do my homework all the time. He goes, why don't you do your homework? I said, I just don't feel like it. Yeah, that was not good, right? So then my dad goes, oh, okay, cool. So if you felt like it, you could do well. And he had taken away, he grounded me. He goes, after I said, I don't feel like doing my homework, he's like, I don't feel like letting you go out. I don't feel like letting you play Xbox. I don't feel like letting you play with your friends. Like, it was the most boring time of my life. For like 3 months, I couldn't do shit. And he goes, so if you felt like it, you could do good. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, all right. I was like, I get straight A's. It's just boring. I literally told my dad I was just bored. I wanted to go outside, play with my friends, play basketball.
I can agree with you 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So he goes, all right, I'll give you $100 if you get straight A's. And this is, back in, I don't know, 99 or something. I don't know, a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was in middle school. And I ended up getting straight A's. And it actually was easy for me. I just put a little bit of effort.
Just got the homework done.
Now, granted, up to this point, never in my entire life did I ever have like those type of grades. Right? So now my dad goes, well, now that I know what you're capable of, I was on the basketball team at that time. I've always been in sports. And he goes, if this changes, he goes, you can only have 2 B's. C's are F's to me. My dad was like military, like he wanted excellence. I was like, all right. And he said, because I know you're capable of this, you've showed me that you can do it. You just got to do it over and over again. So he tricked me. He goes, but if you get anything less than 2 B's, you're off the basketball team.
Yeah.
What do you think happened after that?
No B's, no C's.
I got straight A's. I ended up graduating in the top 3% in California. And I always played 3 sports year round. This is back when everybody played multiple sports. So I was always doing between 2 to 3 sports year round. I never had an off season. Summer was like hell week, football, winter, wrestling / basketball, depending what year. And practices back then, they had, like CIF wasn't as strict, where now in CIF, they only allow you to spend about 20 hours with a team. Back then it was like 3 a days. We did 2 a days, 3 a days. And I'd come home, do homework, do all that. And don't get me wrong, I struggled, but the reward, or I don't know, the fear, it was like, I don't want to get kicked off the team from my dad. My dad's going to pull me out of the team, which was a huge lesson for me.
Yeah.
And I actually make money. So I was like, then in my brain, I was like, wait, that's a win-win. I get to stay on the team and he gives me money and I can go buy some new Jordans or something,
Yeah.
So sports, my favorite, that's something that stayed with me to this day, but that my favorite part about sports is you can be excellent in multiple things at the same time. I don't buy for 1 second that a child cannot do well in school and in sports. Because I've seen both sides. I've seen the kid. I was that kid. I was not very good at school and I did well. And I've also seen the kids that are not very athletic and then they become athletic. Right. So then the average GPA, I know last year, the average GPA for all my kids across the board was like 3.89. And these kids are playing travel ball. They're playing on their high school team. They're training. They're doing hitting lessons. They're doing all this stuff. And they're all getting my entire senior class got a scholarship. And that just showed that you can be excellent in sports and academics and at home, be a good human. So I don't buy for a second that you can't have excellence across the board unless you have a strong bias where you're that parent that's all about the sport. Right. But yeah, that's all I got. There's a lot more bullet points I can cover. I think we'll probably end up doing like multiple episodes on this. Maybe I'll write a book. I don't know. We'll see. I'm thinking about it. But the thing to kind of like wrap it up, being a sports parent is not easy. Not just for the kid, but for us, the commitment. We have full-time jobs. We have to go to practice. We have to drive them around. We have to pay for it. Like there's a lot of sacrifice on both sides. But the most important takeaway is every decision we make, we have to have the end in mind. What do I want my kid to be like when he's 18, 19, 25? When he's, do I want him to be known as the best football player, as like the best human that happened to also be good at football? Yeah.
A great human.
There you go. There you go. Well, this is fun. I think we'll do this again.
Yeah.
I apologize if I was all over the place, but I feel this topic is all over the place.
There's so much to it. Even just trying to look at it from my perspective too, and the lack of knowledge I have, just it's a lot, right? And so I can only imagine what all the parents actually go through and what you go through to try and figure out what's the best way to have our kids succeed.
That's right. Be a good role model for your kids, and
Communicate with them and make sure they're mentally doing well.
that's it. And wear the right hat.
Wear the right hat.
Thank you guys. We'll talk to you guys next week. Don't forget to tune in, subscribe, and have a good day.